The religious, they don't have a clue, which I guess is fine for them because they don't actually want one. They just really want to believe. But I don't care about their beliefs. I care about the actual, demonstrable, verifiable truth that exists in the world that we all share. And they don't seem to be all that concerned with that, do they? Therefore, they just lie, or maybe they just live in an imaginary happy land in their heads where reality, actual reality, is not allowed to intrude. In either case, this is absolutely nothing that they should be proud of. So let's get back to it. We're back with another couple of questions from Redeemed Zoomer's supposed all atheist arguments answered in 10 minutes. And I'm sorry, but he hasn't answered one yet because he's just using imaginary straw men, but I am willing to give him a chance. Can he come up with any actual questions that real atheists ever ask, or is it just going to be these silly imaginary things that he or another website or another video just made up in their heads? I don't know. You tell me.
The Gospels misquote Jesus.
I have no idea how this would even be a thing, since we have no evidence that Jesus ever existed at all. How could you possibly know this unless you had another independent source with verifiable Jesus quotes? That's like saying that the Harry Potter books misquoted Voldemort. Well, think about that for the moment. I'm sure you'll get it. Voldemort isn't real. Voldemort never actually said anything. Besides, what atheist has ever said this? Atheists don't care, by and large, we don't care about the Bible. Atheists don't care about Jesus. Again, I think all of this comes from some religious website somewhere where they just make up a bunch of easy softball statements for the religious to take a swing at, and often, like in this case, they just do it badly. I'm pretty sure the Zoomer is going to miss, but I guess we'll see. Maybe he'll provide some context.
Now, it's true that a lot of secular scholars think the Gospels are a mix of real quotes from the historical Jesus and fake quotes added by the church.
I really haven't heard that one either. Now, I'm not saying there aren't people out there, and he's got a picture of Bart Ehrman on screen, maybe to add some air of legitimacy, but I don't think it's really true. Granted, a lot of atheists will accept a historical Jesus for the sake of argument, without any evidence whatsoever to back it up. Just because it's a relatively non-controversial claim, that doesn't make it true. I am interested only in the truth. I don't play the game with the religious that the Bible is automatically reliable just because they really want it to be. It is what they can demonstrate that it is that matters and nothing else. I have no vested interest in having these conversations with the religious like a lot of atheists do. If they have something more intelligent to say, great, fantastic. If they can back up their claims, that's even better. Otherwise, hasta la vista. I got better things to do.
But none of them can agree on which quotes are legit and which are not, so we can discard their opinions.
Just as we can discard yours. In fact, we can discard everything until we have evidence to back something up. That's the whole point. I don't care what you want to believe. I care what you can demonstrate is actually true. And so far, the religious are batting zero. That's the problem. They refuse to come up to our level. I don't see any reason to think that there is, or was, or ever will be a real historical Jesus. And even if there was, we have no way to determine what that real historical Jesus was actually like, because the whole story has been completely mythologized beyond any rational recognition. Was Jesus born in Bethlehem? Who knows? Zero records to support it. The gospel writers were just desperate to put him there because that's how they interpreted the Hebrew scriptures, which I might add was just wrong. Micah 5:2 doesn't say that Jesus will be born in Bethlehem. the city of Bethlehem. It was talking about a group, not a town. But Matthew was so desperate to find anything that was a so-called prophecy in the ancient writings that he just grabbed the first thing he saw, completely misunderstood the context, and just shoved it into his story. And if you look at Matthew, that happens a lot. It's all just BS.
Jesus never claimed to be God.
Like I said for the last one, you have absolutely no verifiable evidence that Jesus ever existed at all. These are just claims by gullible people who really want it to be true. This is like saying that Harry Potter never claimed to be the chosen one. Okay, so what? Because the one thing you will notice with all of these religious videos is that they start with the assumption that all the things that they already believe, well, those are all automatically true, but they can't back any of them up in any demonstrable way. That's why they need faith. It's why once you start asking these probing questions, most of them just freak out and run away because they have no clue what to do once their preconceptions aren't automatically assumed to be true. That's all they're doing. It's why discussions with the religious virtually never go anywhere worthwhile.
Yes, he did. He didn't say, I am God, worship me, but he showed that he was God in many places in all four Gospels by doing things that only God can do.
And how do you know that? Because again, just asserting things about your imaginary friend, that doesn't make any of it true. This is a massive problem that the religious have, not just Christians, but all religions. They just assert that they know what their gods are like. Well, how do they know that? Demonstrably, I mean. That's the one thing they never have. Well, it says so in my book. Great, then how did the people who wrote your book know that? Again, demonstrably. Because that's a rabbit hole that has no bottom, because it's all claims and no evidence whatsoever. They just want it to be true. This is another thing that is going to make the religious head for the hills, though, isn't it? Because they have no credible answers. They have no evidence-based answers. But what else is new, right?
It's true that he didn't walk around before his resurrection claiming to be God, because he wanted people to figure it out themselves. That's why he kept saying, "Who do you say that I am?"
Well, that's your story anyhow, and this is why they never fare very well. It's all just a bald rationalization. This is what I take from it. But that doesn't make it true. We're here for truth, remember? Your interpretations mean absolutely nothing unless you can demonstrate that there's actual truth behind it. And that's really the problem with Christians in this case, although you can certainly say the same thing about most religions, but your interpretations are going to be different from the interpretations of that guy over there. 45,000 distinct sects, remember? There are no demonstrably true interpretations at all, though, right? The Bible can be read any damn way that you want, and in fact, demonstrably it is. This is not a feature, this is a bug.
However, after his resurrection, people figured out that he was God, and Jesus congratulated them.
According to your book. My book says a thing doesn't matter. How do you know that any of that actually happened without just having faith? Because faith doesn't mean anything. Your wishes and your dreams? Yeah, so what? This is not impressive, and the religious need to get that through their thick skulls. If you are going to assert that you've got a magical guy in the sky and he sent his rape baby to Earth to save humanity from what a dick in the clouds was going to do to them because he's just an asshole, then you'd better have a whole lot more than, but my book says a thing. I mean, at least try.
The later one of the Gospels was written, the more divine it makes Jesus seem, so we can extrapolate that Jesus was originally a human figure who got made more divine over time.
There's a case to be made for that in the Gospels, although Paul, who wrote first, he put Jesus as a cosmic spook, not a real person that walked the earth, so I don't really think that stands up to any kind of rational scrutiny. Because, again, I am not convinced that there ever was a real Jesus, but even if there was, we can know absolutely nothing about what he was actually like, because it's all been buried under massive piles of mythological bullshit. They have to assume these things, but they can't verifiably demonstrate any of it. If they could do that, then we wouldn't need faith, would we? Arguing, my imaginary friend is more real than your imaginary friend, strikes me as a complete waste of time. Come back when you have evidence. Because until then, I'm just going to roll my eyes.
Alright, maybe some Gospels emphasize Jesus' divinity more than others, but what about Paul's letters that fully confess the divinity of Jesus and were also written before any of the Gospels? So that breaks your pattern.
I figured he'd come to the same conclusion, but not for the same reasons. Like I said, I don't think I've ever seen any atheist saying a lot of these things. It comes off as all made up. Granted, I can't say that no one's ever said it because I have no way of knowing that, but these are not at all the common atheist arguments that you tend to see, and he's saying that he's going to handle all atheist arguments, and to be honest, he's running out of time. Maybe he's just saving the actual arguments for the end, I don't know. I guess we can only wait and see.
The Bible supports slavery.
Which it does. There is no way to deny it. God not only says that slavery's okay, he tells the Hebrews where they can get their slaves, how they must treat them, and how they can trick their Hebrew slaves into becoming hereditary property forever. If God can tell the Jews not to wear mixed fabrics, surely he could say, don't own other human beings as property. But no, he doesn't do that, does he? Not ever. Nowhere in the Bible is slavery ever explicitly outlawed. Now, a lot of Christians will say, well, they were just going to do it anyway. Well, what a weak, pathetic God you got there, especially since, as I already said, he outlawed a bunch of other really minor things, apparently successfully. But he couldn't bother addressing keeping slaves. Yeah, fuck your God, and fuck you too for believing in it. But let's see what Zoomer has to say.
No, it doesn't. Just because there's slavery in the Bible doesn't mean the Bible supports it.
Absolutely false. This is yet another problem that the religious have, because God never condemned it before. In fact, the Bible was one of the major supporting documents for both American and British slavery in the 1800s, so apparently they disagree with you. This is all just a bald rationalization. It's people desperate to get around what the Bible actually says to what society supports today. But if the Bible was inspired by God, which a lot of Christians claim, then why does it even tangentially defend slavery by providing rules for keeping people as property? Shouldn't it just say, don't keep slaves? If morality is objective, meaning it never changes, then how the hell do you justify that? This is yet another place where they just run away. I mean, honestly, try it for yourself. It's kind of funny to watch. They're going to make excuses for why they got to be over there someplace. But don't let them try to slip away. Are they saying that Leviticus wasn't inspired by God? When Paul told slaves to obey their masters in Ephesians 6:1, was he not inspired by God? Even Jesus talked about spiritual slavery, and that's still goddamn stupid, isn't it? Yet for all of this, there isn't a single mention in the Bible anywhere where God said that there should be no slaves at all. Justify that. I dare you.
There are some Old Testament verses that could be interpreted as condoning slavery, but Jesus himself said that the Old Testament made accommodations to people's sinful state.
Bullshit. Because God gave people the 10 Commandments.
Hear me! Oh, hear me! All pay heed! The Lord Jehovah, has given unto you these 10 commandments for all to obey.
There are 613 laws in the Old Testament. I guess God couldn't have shoved don't own people as property in there as one of those. I mean, he managed to throw in don't eat the sinew of the thigh in Genesis 32:33, but he couldn't manage don't own people? I mean, how fucking stupid is your God?
And also, slave owners in the American South had slave Bibles for their slaves to read, but it omitted a lot of the real Bible, so if the Bible actually did support slavery, this wouldn't have been necessary.
Yeah, and the parts they left out, those were the parts where people sought freedom. They left in all the stories about Joseph's enslavements, but the part with Moses leading the Israelites out of captivity, yeah, that was omitted because they didn't want to give the slaves any ideas. One of the biggest supports that Christians used during American slavery was the aforementioned Ephesians 6:1. That tells me that this guy is either lying, or he's ignorant, or most likely both, because that's not how history actually worked.
Christianity supported slavery.
Which we've already addressed, so I'm just going to let him get on with it to keep this from getting overly long, which it really already is going to be, but sorry. Anyway, make your point and I'll just rip it apart if I haven't already done so.
Well, sure, some Christians did, but all human civilizations have had slavery. Christian civilization was the first one to abolish it on moral grounds.
Oh, so I guess the idea that God wrote morality on our hearts is just nonsense then, right? If everybody else is jumping off a cliff, would you do it too? Yeah, this once again shows why Christianity is such a joke. You've got Christians on one side using Christianity and the Bible to justify an action, when you've also got Christians on the other side using Christianity and the Bible to condemn that exact same action. It's not just slavery that has that problem, though, does it? When women wanted the vote, who opposed it? Christians. When gay people wanted to get married, who opposed it? Christians. It's Christians who are the dicks here, not everybody else. Always have been, and they always will be, at least until they go extinct, which really can't happen too soon. Everywhere that it is possible to be on the wrong side of history, you find Christians there demanding that God hates progress. Now, there are other things that we can say here, of course, but that's really off topic, so we're just going to leave that one alone for now.
The fact that you're against slavery is due to Christian influence.
Nope. It's because secularism rose and made human equality a thing. You can go out there right now and find Christian groups that are today pro-slavery. You can go out there right now and find Christian groups that are anti-equality. Pretty much every racist group out there is Christian in origin. Now, that's not just Christianity, because the Muslims are terrible at this too, but if you want to find hate, you just have to go and look at religion. Just about all of the hate-filled bigots out there are religious. Not all of them, of course, but the vast majority. That kind of says something about your beliefs, doesn't it?
Also, most organizations fighting modern-day slavery are Christian.
Nope. So let's look at some, shall we? Anti-Slavery International. It's a group that started in 1839, but the modern version, if you go and look at its website, it says nothing at all about Christianity. Go look at their values page. Zero religion mentioned, period. Or Free the Slaves, an international non-governmental organization and lobby group that was once part of Anti-Slavery International, but now it's just its own thing. No open religion there either that I can see. It was founded based on the research of Kevin Bales and exists to eliminate slavery in places like India, Nepal, Ghana, and the Congo, among others. These are not open Christians pushing an openly Christian message. We can also talk about Hope for Justice, which is not religious, or Stop the Traffic with a K, which is non-religious. Hell, there's a list of anti-slavery charities and NGOs, and I can't find anything on there that looks remotely Christian at all. In fact, a couple of them specifically say they are fighting the religious underpinnings of a lot of modern-day slavery. I'll post it all down below if anybody wants to go take a look. You are just wrong.
God killed tons of people in the Bible. Well, it's actually way more than that. God numbers everyone's days. He's the giver of life, so he can take it, especially if people sin.
Hey, brought you into this world. I can take you out of it. Yeah, fuck you. This is just abusive, but these are the kind of people that gravitate toward religion. This is not something that you should believe. This just shows that you've got some major problems upstairs. But you've got to remember that a lot of people believe in gods because they are terrified of being abused if they don't, either by other theists or by the gods themselves. If you have to be afraid of your imaginary friend, you are doing something seriously wrong. Just saying.
Atheist countries are more prosperous.
Secular countries, yes. Look at any happiness index, and that is demonstrably true. The ones who are the most miserable are the ones who are the most religious. So let's just look at the bottom 10 on the happiness index. South Sudan. As of 2020, they were 60.5% Christian, 32.9% traditional faiths, 6.2% Muslim, and 0.4% other or none. Next, Yemen. As of 2010, which is the last year I could find data on, it was 99% Muslim. Central African Republic. Now, we've talked about them many times before. In the central, west, and south of the country, it's pretty much all Christian. North, it's pretty much all Muslim. There is an ongoing civil war that's been going since about 2012 between the Christians and the Muslims, where they're just trying to kill each other. Afghanistan. I trust we don't have to talk about that one too much. Somalia. Yeah, same thing. Chad, Congo, I mean, we can just go down the list. All of them are heavily religious. So what about the most prosperous and happy? Denmark, which according to Gallup in 2017 is 61% non-religious. Sweden, 73% non-religious. Norway, 62% non-religious. Finland, 55% non-religious. Switzerland, I mean, there aren't any figures for 2017 that I could find, but in 2015, it was 58% non-religious. That's something else you're going to notice, but the numbers from 2015 to 2017, where we have those numbers, those percentages are only going up. For Denmark, for example, in 2015, it was 52%, and in 2017, it was 61%. This is going on across the board. This is also very, very clear. This guy might be trying to rationalize his way around it, but let's be honest, he's just full of shit.
Yes, it's true that Northern European countries are very prosperous and very secular, but correlation doesn't equal causation. It's not like atheism causes prosperity, it's that prosperity causes atheism because when people have comfortable lives, they don't feel a need to depend on God.
That's true. He actually kind of surprised me there. But here's the other thing. All of those countries have well-educated populaces, whereas the ones where religion is prevalent, they don't. The US is actually an outlier. There is a direct, demonstrable, negative correlation between advanced education and religiosity. The more you know, the less you tend to believe. The better the economy, the less you need a god. That's why religion goes after poor people, right? The uneducated are the only ones dumb enough to actually fall for it. And we've made this point many times before. Now, he's right that correlation is not causation, but it's funny that the only place that he'd admit to that is where it makes his religion look bad, right? Because when you look at the religious talking about prayer, it's always, I prayed, something happened, therefore, God done it. Sorry, don't be a hypocrite. Not only do studies prove that prayer works at a rate no greater than random chance, but just asserting God done it all the time doesn't prove that God done it. That's why I always ask for direct, demonstrable evidence between the cause and the event, because nothing less will do. And that's something they don't have, right?
But why are these particular countries so prosperous in the first place? They may be secular now, but they're rooted in generations and generations of Protestant Christianity.
So, desperately looking for an out, huh? Okay, let's take a case study. Denmark, the highest on the list that we saw before. The reason that they are prosperous today is because they have the largest natural gas and oil reserves in the EU, or at least they've been one of the biggest producers. I don't know, gross if they actually have the largest, but whatever. So it's a relatively modern thing. The problem is we don't have a good gauge on how secular the country was before about 2000 because they weren't doing those studies. We do see a lot of theists claiming credit for things that they had absolutely nothing demonstrably to do with, and that seems to be what's going on here. We laid the foundation doesn't mean anything without demonstrable evidence, and the religious don't seem to have any. So this is just another empty claim among a whole lot of empty claims, and until he can prove that it's actually demonstrably true, we don't have to take you seriously, because we shouldn't. So, with that said, moving on.
If you want an example of a country that's atheist and not rooted in Christianity, look at communist China.
Yup, and they are an economic powerhouse. They're also not really that communist anymore, although they like to play the part, but I guess that's neither here nor there. They are also not in the top 20 happiest nations, at least not on the 2024 report. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're just getting started, and most of the country isn't benefiting from the modern advancements. I figure that's going to change over the next decade or so, but my guesses don't mean any more than his does, so, like I said, moving on. Anyhow, I think we're just going to stop here for the day, although we got through a little bit more than we did the first time. The first video we covered 1:44 of content, and this time we managed 2 minutes and 23 seconds. But this is still going to take a while because it's such concentrated stupid, so I guess what can you expect? So, what do you think so far? Let me know down in the comments. So much of this just requires some basic thought, maybe a simple Google search to debunk, and the religious, they don't seem to be really capable of that, do they? They're only reading their own sources because they only care about their own justifications. They only care about their own confirmation bias. They just want to believe it, but wanting to believe it isn't enough. I also don't think that many, if any, actual atheists have ever brought most of this up. I can't say for sure. I don't hear these things very commonly. He's trying to debunk what I think are mostly imaginary nonsense while trying to support his own imaginary nonsense. How's that going for you? Because we see this kind of thing all the time, don't we? Theists saying that they're responding to atheist questions or claims or whatever it is, while not responding to actual atheist questions or claims or whatever, because they can't actually handle what we're really asking. So they just make it up. Or they just go to other religious websites that have just made it up, or they just go to other videos that have just made it up. And I'm not claiming that this guy is a liar himself, although he certainly could be, but they don't tend to ask a lot of questions when it comes to finding video material, do they? I'll just keep going, though, because tearing down theist misconceptions is useful, if only to show why they're wrong all the time. But if you have any thoughts on the matter, go ahead and put those down below because I always find that interesting. So anyway, we'll be back in a week with another batch of nonsense, but what can you expect from the faithful? These people are just not that bright. They've got some serious problems. But debunking that, hey, I have fun with that, so let's do some more.